Today I'm interviewing a good friend of mine called Phil Soanes. Phil is a recording artist who puts out music under the title of Rusted Sounds. It turns out we even live in the same city, so we'll be chatting about some of our experiences as immigrants to new countries. Phil also owns the Resonating Wood record label, so we'll have a chat about that. And I want to find out what makes Phil tick, who he is, and why he's become the musician that he's become. So first of all, Phil, welcome to the interview, and thank you so much for doing this.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome. I first came across you through a mutual friend of ours, I think Greg, from the band Savak in Poland. And he mentioned that we actually live in the same town. And then we later found out that we live maybe 5 minutes walk from each other in the same town, which is unusual for a Brit and an Irish guy.
Yeah.
And then we kind of connected through the fact that we're both musicians and we're interested in similar types of things, and through your label. So can you talk a little bit about your journey and how you ended up here? Let's say we're in Bratislava in Slovakia, which seems like a reasonable way from home.
Yeah. My journey began about 14 years ago. I was traveling and I did a volunteer project in Hungary. I worked on an eco farm and I met some different people from different countries, and I was kind of at a loose end. I was kind of restless and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I met some Polish people and they invited me to go to Poland, and they lived in Krakow. But I ended up in a smaller town called Jaworzno, and I began there as an English teacher, which was something I kind of didn't have any idea how I would. Well, I had no experience as a teacher, but I managed to get a job because of the advantage that it's my native language and it's based on pretty much that and nothing else. And I worked 1 year in this town, and then I went to Krakow, and I spent about 10 years in Krakow, which is where I met Greg from Savak. And while traveling in Georgia one summer, I met who later became my girlfriend, and that's what brought me to Bratislava, because she is from Ukraine and I was living in Krakow, and we were meeting back and forth for a few months, and after some time, we thought it would be nice to live in the same city. But we didn't want to live in the cities that we were living in at that time. So we basically went where she found a job, and that happened to be Bratislava, and that's what brought us here.
Great.
And that was about 5 years ago, I think.
Uh-huh. And so I talked a bit about in the intro that you record your own songs, that you're a musician. When you kind of move around, and you've lived in a lot of different places, you talked about Poland, and you're from Ireland originally.
Yeah, that's right.
And so you're like me, you're an immigrant.
Yeah.
How do you think that kind of, do you think the travel and experiences that you've had, does that kind of inform your music? Have you tried to actively kind of integrate that?
Yeah, I think that's something that it's kind of a subconscious thing that comes out in the music. And it's only, I remember once sharing some music to a friend, and he kept saying that in my music, there's this idea of home or cities or streets or places these motives kept appearing all the time. And I'd never really thought about it because I didn't really analyze it too much. And then when I looked more closely at the lyrics, which sounds strange, but I tend not to overanalyze what I write. And then I realized that there was this definitely a sense of dislocation and a sense of wanting to belong somewhere. And I think that definitely comes from the traveling, that it's kind of, while it gives a lot in terms of what you can experience and what you can see and the different cultures and so on that you can interact with, it also, I think it kind of gives you a sense of feeling lost in a way, because then I think after a number of years, I don't know if you have the same experience, but it becomes harder to kind of go back to where you came from originally, back to your roots. I find it's quite difficult now to kind of reconnect with that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I guess I always feel like a nomad.
Yeah.
But that said, I always feel at home wherever I am. And in some ways, I've lived in five, I think, different countries in my life, and I very much feel when I've been in those places that that's my home, and I can't imagine going back or being somewhere else. And then I move on, and then I feel at home here or wherever I am. So I can kind of feel like I can enjoy that situation. Is that something that you kind of feel, or?
I think it's something that I struggled with for a long time, and um, I think I've kind of had this great desire to call a place home. But I think in more recent years, I don't mind so much because I think it's I think home is wherever you make it, and it's um, I think you can always be somewhere else, but I think it's very important to try to make the best of where you are and try to um, make that place a home as much as possible. And
Mhm.
I think it's also I think it's maybe home is just a state of mind that
Mhm.
maybe that's it's not about where you were born or you're where you were brought up, but it's about where you try to, I don't know, make things work. I mean, of
Mhm.
course, it's about people, but then when you have people like in different places, I don't know. Maybe we could say that there are different homes, and there is not one. You don't need to have one perhaps specific home, but I guess generally, I would say it's the people that make the home.
Yeah, I think so. So you record as Rusted Sounds, and you talked about the dislocation that sometimes you feel, but you don't really overanalyze your lyrics. But do you feel that somehow that might be that idea of rust and decay and that kind of thing? Is that something that's associated with that dissociation, or is it something that else? Or does it come from somewhere else, or just sounded cool?
Well, I think initially it's kind of funny because my surname is Soanes, and if for some reason it's a very hard name to maybe not to pronounce, but to accept. And many times it was mistaken when I was in Ireland. It was mistaken as Jones or Stones or even once Summers, and then some friends of mine kind of were making fun of my name, and they were saying Sounds, and I thought that's kind of interesting. And then the rusted part um, came from it came from I think I like this. I've had a few kind of nicknames over not nicknames that actually people have given me, but I've given myself, like email addresses and so on. And uh, one of them was it's your porn name. If you ever want to find your porn name, you take your pet's name and then your mother's maiden name. So this was, in my case, was Rusty Grimes, which I thought was fantastic. Um, I thought it was a really classic porn name. So this is where the Rusty was my dog. So the Rust started from this, and then over time, I remember thinking I would like to, if I perform solo, I would like to have a different name, and I just combined the rusted element with sounds because I thought my music is not, I would say it's not very polished, and it's I know I have my flaws when I play, so I thought that I can kind of accept them as they are, and I thought that this name worked well for
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
But
So you've just blown that whole mythos of the deep emotional artist by saying, well, that's my porn name, right?
the problem was people. The problem is people still mix the porn name with this stage name, so it kind of lost some of its credibility.
But I think that's really cool. I think it's kind of difficult to know why we've chosen things in the past, but it's good to have kind of a connection to that. Um, and it gives. I was the same. I didn't want to put out music under my name, like this is Andy Lee, because I wanted to give myself the flexibility to have people in the band or do some other stuff or put out things as something else. So was that also partly that, or is it just that you wanted something, a label to kind of, I don't know, hide behind, maybe is the wrong word, but something to shield you a
Yeah,
bit?
I think it was a label. I think it kind of was a label because I don't know if it was understood this way, but I think I was trying to present myself that I'm. Uh, Maybe it was kind of a self-derogatory thing that I was presenting myself like with the name. I was trying to present myself as like basically here I am with my flaws, but I'm okay with that, and the name should reflect that I'm okay with that. That I'm not trying to be that you're going to hear rusted sounds. That it's not going to be clean or polished or, but this is what it is. So I think that's what I was trying to do
Yeah.
with that name.
And so, you've talked a little bit about getting the name and stuff. So, what informs the music? To me, as you I kind of also get this sense of I get a sense of longing. When I hear to some of your songs, and it's not really melancholy. More, I would say it's more like a sense of there's some distance. There's somewhere that you're traveling to and some feeling of going somewhere. So what kind of motivates you when you write? Do you have a theme in mind, or are you telling a story, or is it autobiographical? And so I guess I'm asking like where do the songs start and where do you end, or where do you end and the songs start?
I would say I don't know. I think I often find my songs are like diary entries, and that they capture a particular thing that was happening at that time. And I mean, there is the whole cliche that you write like the best from pain and suffering,
Mm.
and but I think it's kind of true because I think I've tried to write uplifting songs, and I always felt they found kind of cheesy, and they didn't really. I don't know. They never really stuck with me. Whereas the most poignant songs are those ones that were written. Maybe they were painful at that time, but they're the
Mm.
songs that over the course of time, they're the ones that I can turn to, and I really value those songs.
Mhm.
So I think I would say that I was often inspired in those difficult moments to kind of, I guess, to try to find a way to channel what I was feeling, and to like a diary entry to write it down,
Mhm.
and to try to use it as some sort of way to deal with the situation. But of course, that's a very sometimes it was quite then painful to play these songs because
Sure.
you don't know, like when you're playing to the audience, they don't know perhaps the story. They might get a different feeling from the song, but sometimes when I recalled exactly where it came from, it was quite difficult. Um, but then over time they fade, like the feelings faded, and the songs remained. But I think also I often liked sometimes, like for example, when I used to play in a band with Greg. Speaking about Greg,
Mhm.
we'd have a jam, and he'd record it, and he'd send the files back, and he would give it a really interesting title,
Mhm.
and then I would kind of feed off that, and I kind of really enjoyed that. It was kind of it gave me something to work from.
Yeah.
Um, and besides that, I don't know. I think I think the challenge is always to write better than your last, and I guess
Mhm.
that's the motivation, but it's also sometimes the most frustrating thing. Like I've written
Mhm.
some songs, and I thought, that's it. I won't be able to beat this. This is like my kind of my peak. But
Yeah.
then maybe a few months later, I'll write something else that I'll enjoy playing, and I'll value that equally.
Yeah. Do you think that comes from like a sense of frustration, or I was thinking about this today when I went for a bike ride and I was just I was singing Nick Drake's song Riverman in my head. It
Yeah,
kept kind of winding over, and then I started to think about we have this kind of attitude of like, oh, what could he have done if he'd only lived? That's almost like saying what he did wasn't good enough, So, and
yeah.
I was thought about that myself. It's like we always ask musicians, or, oh, what's your next album? What are you working on? What's coming up? As if what you've already given isn't enough. But I also feel that about myself. It's like, well, those are old songs now. But do you kind of get that? Is that what's driving you to write new things, that you feel like I want to do better, or you just have to, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, I think there's always that feeling that I can always do better than my last. But then there are moments of nostalgia where I go back through some old archives, and Actually, recently, I think in this whole kind of coronavirus situation, I feel among my friends, there's kind of a lot of nostalgia in the air, and some friends from the past contacted me and they said, let's try and record these songs that we never really finished. And um, I came back to them and I realized that actually these were really good songs, and I really kind of missed them. And because I haven't played them in a long time, they felt kind of fresh again.
Right.
But I would say the overriding motivation is that I can do better, that I can always do better, and that's something that's, I don't know if you have the same feeling, but I find that when I finish an album, and then after some time I listen to it, I feel like at the time I was happy with it, and then I feel I'm not satisfied
Yeah.
after a period of time, or maybe there are a couple of songs that I'm really happy with, but the others I'm not, and I think, okay, the next one will be better.
Right. Yeah, I have this, I guess I have the same kind of reasoning, I have this love-hate with music, where I just feel like I do something and I'm proud of it, but then I start listening back to it and I can't stand it.
Yeah.
And then after some time I hear it again and I think, actually that was good and it was worth something. So I don't know, that's a very difficult thing, but I'm interested that kind of drives you to do more. Is it like, so do you feel like do you struggle, if I can ask you, do you struggle with kind of insecurities around the music, or do you question your motivation, like why are you doing it? Do you feel like it's a struggle to actually need to do this?
Yeah, I think. I often question, where does this come from? Because in the past I played with people, and they stopped playing music, um, I've often wondered what is it that has kept me going. Like, and I think I don't really. I think the greatest motivation is. I think I don't know. I think I'm just um, a firm believer in the arts, and I would like to be able to contribute as much as I can. But I think there's also, and I this is maybe is a deeper feeling, this feeling of wanting to be accepted. And that's something that I kind of struggle with sometimes, because I think that why do I have this feeling of wanting to be accepted and why do I want people to accept me through music? I struggle with this sometimes, because I don't really know where this feeling comes from, but I think it's if I get a reaction through my music, I know that it makes me incredibly happy.
Yeah, I've said a few times that I'm going to name my next album "A Desperate Cry for Validation," and it's interesting. I've talked with a few people about this, and the idea that there's a need that drives you to do it, and it's very hard to separate this motivation from, like, am I just doing it because I want people to think I'm great? Or am I really doing it because I need to do it and it's some kind of addiction, and maybe in that case it's negative? Or am I just doing it because I love it and I want to, and I have to somehow express myself? And I think it's something that every musician faces. I think there's this insecurity about why and how. And there's always someone better, and should I even bother? And I think that's something that's interesting to kind of analyze, but in the end, we still make music. So
Yeah. So it's I guess for a lot of people, maybe it's a mix of these things. It's also just to be cool as well, perhaps for some people. It's nice when you say, "Oh, I play music," and then people are interested, and it's. But for me, I think it's more about if someone listens to the music and they really appreciate the lyrical content, or the composition, that means more to me than someone saying, "Oh, you're a musician." That doesn't mean so much to me, because anyone can say they're a musician, but if someone really values and really listens to the music, then and
Yeah.
they give you feedback on that, I think that really means something.
Right. So I was going to, I was going to talk a little bit about the emotional kind of connection with music. Was that something that because you have your own label,
Yeah.
Resonating Wood Records, and I was wondering if what guides you when you're picking an artist. Is it some emotional connection like you've just been talking about that you just feel like you like that thing, or how does it work? Are you looking for genre, or how does that go?
Well, initially the idea was that it was going to be an acoustic only label because initially at the very beginning, a friend of mine, he has a label called Preserved Sound Records, and it's an ambient label, and we talked about doing an acoustic label, um, um, and that's where it began. And then after some time, I thought, why limit it to acoustic music? Because um, I mean, if someone sends me something that I like and that's interesting, I don't want to say no because it's not acoustic. So I think that's why, for me, it's what I if someone contacts me, I basically would basically it's all about if I like it or not, and if I believe it's something I can support, then I'm happy to release it.
Yeah. I've listened to a few recordings, and one of the artists on your label is I hope I say this right, Algis Fediavales.
Fedievas.
Fedievas. Okay, I didn't say it right, but
I never. It took me many years.
and he doesn't sing in English, but yet I just feel like I would like the lyrics if I knew what they were, and I would feel like they're speaking to me because the music speaks to me, and the way that he speaks in his song is something that really resonates, even though it's very unusual. I guess I would call it outsider art in a way. It's not like the regular kind of pop music structure, or even like regular song structures. They're kind of long compositions with different winds and so on. How did you come about meeting someone like Algis and then putting him on your label, especially not knowing what the lyrical content is, presumably, and
No, I mean I've read translations, but I mean until that point I had no idea what he was singing about. But it's funny. I met him in a bar in Georgia, and it was my last night in Georgia, and a friend of mine invited me to this concert, and I met him, and I said I really liked the concert. I said, why don't you come and play in Krakow? And I thought he would never come. I thought we probably wouldn't. I wouldn't hear from him again. And then he wrote to me and said, I want to come. So I said, okay, cool. I'll set something up. And he came. He hitchhiked all the way from Lithuania to
wow,
Krakow, and I was terrified that he wouldn't make it because he was writing to me like, okay, like I'm somewhere in the middle of Poland. I'm hoping to get a ride in the next um, few hours or so, and so he really embodied this kind of kind of on the road kind of bohemian
yeah,
musician. Um, so he came and it was great. And then after that, uh, we did a number of concerts in different countries. We played in Ukraine. I went to Lithuania, and we built a very strong friendship based on this. And every year we try to meet. And it's for me he's particularly one of the he's very inspirational for me because he kind of forces me to do something, because when I play with other people I'm kind of more active, but when I'm focused on solo music I'm lazy, and he really gives me a kick up the arse to do something, and he's a very inspirational character. And
yeah,
but the question about language was interesting because I remember at the beginning asking him like, how do you think people perceive your music? And I think that they, like you said, I think they just they imagine, they get sucked in by the atmosphere of the music. And I know he's played in the UK, and I'm curious how it goes, how it's gone there, because I think people just they feel something when he plays, and I think
yeah.
that's what it's all about, even if they don't particularly don't understand the lyrics.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, I think probably all of us do this, but I kind of project my own story onto songs, whatever they are. If I like a song or it speaks to me somehow or I feel something by it, and you feel like, I guess I project to that, like I feel emotionally connected to the person, not just to the song, like to the artist. And I guess that's sometimes why it can be disappointing when you suddenly hear, like, I don't know, one of your heroes has made statements in the news that you don't quite agree with or something like that. So you realize, well, this guy's views don't align. But I'm sure that's not the case with Algis. But I feel like it's always great when you feel kind of the emotional connection with something real. It was really coming from that good place in a
Yeah.
person's heart, and it's something that the songs feel true. They feel genuine.
And that's the thing. On the label, actually, there are a lot of the artists I've never met, and I'm kind of it's kind of that feeling that I have an impression of these people, and I hope that uh, we will meet one day, and I hope that it will be as I imagine it to be. But who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very diverse label, and I guess I guess I should also ask, really, does it has the exposure to it? You say that Elgis kind of drives you and gives you a boot in the ass. Does it
Yeah.
actually influence your own music in some ways when you hear that and you think, oh, that's a great idea. Maybe I can incorporate that into my playing. I'm not talking about copying, but every poet is a thief, right? So,
Yeah, yeah. I think there's always an element of this because it might even be a subconscious thing, but I think, yeah, definitely with his music, because he has some instrumental music, and
yeah.
I've kind of gone a little bit in that direction, probably because of the influence of him. But I think also listening to um, any music, I think it tends to have some sort of influence, even if we want to be as original as we can be. I think there's always that influence.
Yeah. I'm just shifting subjects a little bit, but it just sort of kind of occurred to me that, here in Slovakia, it's, very gradually they're starting to lift some of the restrictions, but we've been in lockdown because of the coronavirus.
Yeah,
And, the lockdown thing has been interesting and challenging and frustrating and difficult, but, I kind of hear a lot of messages, and especially from kind of music people, I guess, people that I follow and so on, saying, oh, use the time, have be motivated. It's perfect time to write that song, book, draw that art or whatever. And I think actually that the lockdown has been a struggle for a lot of people. And I'm not just talking about, working musicians, because obviously that's financially challenging, but I'm talking about the the struggles to keep going as a musician and to actually do something, and then fighting, for me at least, fighting with this kind of guilt of not achieving, which is kind of mad. But how have you handled the lockdown? How's it been for you?
I kind of feel like it's been an opportunity, and it's a strange feeling. I feel like if I don't come out of this with like a new album, I'll feel like I didn't use the time productively. I feel it's been quite interesting that people from the past have been in touch, and that's what I mentioned earlier about this kind
Yeah.
of nostalgia. I think people have had time to reflect on the past, and I mean, I found myself to be quite busy, um, like with some projects, some musical projects, and there've been some online open mics. I was really happy I could reconnect with an open mic I used to organize in Krakow, so that was really a lot of fun. And I think it's been of course it's been frustrating that you can't we still can't do the things that we kind of took for granted, and but I think there've been many positives to come out of the difficult situation. But I'm very curious about where live music is going to go, because
Yeah.
I guess that's going to take some time before that
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
come back again, and that's a big shame.
Yeah, and it's a real challenge for small venues to also rely on that kind of income for people coming and seeing musicians, but as well as the musicians themselves who come and play. And I'm sure bigger venues will be okay, but I do feel for the kind of small venues that keep musicians like us
Yeah.
going. So yeah, I'm really glad that you found that to be an opportunity. I think it's great that you've felt that you can, that it has motivated you and that it's been something positive coming out of it. So that's fantastic to hear.
And I think you've also been busy as well, haven't you?
I've it's been very difficult for me. Unfortunately, I tend to set my expectations too high, and I ask a lot of myself for no reason really. No one's asking, no one's waiting for the Ashen album, but I just kind of tend to put myself in the position where I've got too much going on, and then I get frustrated, and then I just delete stuff because I have a bit of a crisis and decide I'm not a musician anymore. So for me, it has been challenging, but I have been doing things, and obviously working on this series of interviews has been nice because it's kind of taken me out of my comfort zone a bit of just trying to do music. But yeah, I've been doing bits, and I've got things in the pipeline, which is nice. But I won't come out of it with an album.
Well, I think I'm also my family responsibilities have not really matched with my expectations or my
Yeah.
but still I think it's yeah, I think it's been nice to revisit the past. I mean, that's something
Yeah.
I've
Yeah, I
enjoyed.
saw you put a YouTube video up a few days ago with a friend of yours in Poland of a piece that you'd worked on together. So was that kind of that part of nostalgia thing which happened?
That was one of them because that's the first time. It was a project, a duo called Seesaw, and it
Mm-hmm.
was something that ended because we moved to different places, um, and Eric, the guy I play with, he's not as nostalgic as I am. So I was really delighted that he agreed to do it because it was, and I was delighted that he also kind of found that listening back to these old songs that he enjoyed them again.
Mm.
And I'm really hopeful that we can continue with this in the
Yeah,
future because I feel we have some unfinished work to do.
yeah. That's really good. I do feel that this one thing that has happened. We have as musicians and many others have found ways to. We've been forced to find ways to communicate and forced to find ways to continue. We can't just go to our band rehearsals and do our stuff and do our shows. But we've been finding ways to do output as you've worked remotely with people. And I think that probably is something that might continue. I do think that's something that you'll try to make sure goes on. Like, it's so easy to think, oh, we'll just return to life, but I don't know what normal life looks like anymore. So.
I think yeah, that's a big question. I mean, I mean, I've read a lot of different opinions that things will never go back to normal, or there will be a new normal, and it's really hard to say. I mean, maybe we'll look back at this in a couple of years and say, well, that was strange, and maybe
Mm,
things will be back to normal. But I think what's been interesting from all this is we can see how much technology is involved in our lives and how
yeah.
in these times we can really use it to our advantage. And can you, like, if you can imagine, I don't know, 40 years ago something like this,
Mm,
it would have been much more. I guess we would have been sitting in front of TV screens or listening to the radio, but just the level of communication that we can that internet and technology can provide right now is,
yeah.
I think, has made it a lot easier.
Yeah.
I mean, while it's not the same as meeting in person,
Mm,
it still somehow helped a lot of people, I think,
yeah.
to kind of get through this.
Fantastic, Phil. Thank you. I'm just going to ask one more question before
Okay.
we wrap it up, and it's kind of a funny question. I have sometimes this internal narrative that I'm like having a discussion with myself and imagining what people would ask me, and then what I would like to answer, I guess. So I'm going to ask you: is there anything that you would wish people would ask you about, or that you would really like to say, that nobody ever asks, or that you just feel like you just want to have out there as a thing?
Um, oh, that's a difficult one. Maybe, um, maybe something about particular songs being misinterpreted as love
Hmm.
songs when they were not love songs. Because I've always kind of felt that I cannot write a love song because it's extremely difficult. So um, maybe there've been times with particular songs that people that I'd wish that that the true message had gotten out there, and not
Yeah.
that it was interpreted as a love song.
So can you give me an example of a song? Let's do that, and I'm going to I'll play a snippet of it at the end of the interview. The song that you wish you'd got the
Oh,
story of.
well, there's a song from many years ago. It was a song. It was a song I wrote. It was a group I was playing with called the Sunday Sessions, and the song was called "Wake Me Up,"
Hmm.
and it was interpreted, I think, as a love song. I don't know. Should I explain or should I
Sure.
keep?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I would say that the song was about the love of music. So I guess there was an
Okay.
element of love, but it was not about a person. But I
Hmm.
guess if people want to interpret things and get something out of it,
Yeah.
then in their own way, then I guess who am I to come along and say no, no, that's not what the song was about.
Yeah. That's a really interesting thing. I've heard, and I'm going to badly misquote, but I've actually heard it something to the effect. Somebody said that you don't have, you may have written it, but you don't know what it's about. And that's what analysis is for. It's for someone else to come and tell you what's really about. And I question that a little bit. I don't think that's entirely true, but I do feel like sometimes when you've written a song and it's out there and it kind of doesn't belong to you anymore, and the interpretation isn't yours anymore. You interpret it as you sing it, and if you perform live, you always, you can always explain a little bit about what it's about. Although I tend to like not like doing that, but I do feel that, yeah, it's really interesting, like that idea that people think something else, and I guess it comes back to this idea of projecting ourselves onto songs.
Yeah, and I think but I think there's definitely something in that once you've written it, then it's kind of in the public domain. I mean, if you
Hmm.
perform it, then I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily good to say too much about the song. I think
Yeah,
that it's good to, okay, you can say a little perhaps. I mean, but I
yeah.
think it's good that it's nice when people sometimes they form their own interpretation, and
Hmm.
sometimes it can be very interesting. I've had it sometimes where I've actually kind of thought maybe you're right, maybe that's what the song is
Yeah,
about,
yeah.
and not what I thought it was about.
Yeah, yeah. I've had that experience even with myself, and I've kind of gone back and analyzed the lyrics, and I thought, well, actually, that was about this. And sometimes that writing process it's coming from you, but it's also coming from lots of different places in your mind and your subconscious, and sometimes your subconscious, I think, makes the connections that you don't when you write music. So there's that kind of flow to it, that suddenly somehow makes sense, because I genuinely don't know where the lyrics come from. It's not like I sit down and sort of think, right, this is going to be the lyric for this song. It just happens in fragments and pieces, and then it's a song.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that
and
how it works for you? I mean, maybe you're different. You can write whole things all the time, and
I think I usually take the blank page approach. That I think, well, usually I come up with a melody first, like on the guitar, and then I start singing kind of nonsense, and then I start kind of forming sounds that kind of I like, and
mm,
then and that's generally the easy part. But then the hard part is really writing something that can fit to these sounds. And so generally that would be my approach. It's not like I get this sudden eureka moment when I wake up in the middle of the night and think I've got it. It's usually
okay,
just, I would say it's usually about hard work
yeah,
and graft than anything else.
yeah. There's definitely a lot of craft, I think, that comes with it, but it's so rare for me that I have any idea what I'm doing. And then it just sometimes it'll just flow from a word or a single line, and then I think I don't question the process too much, to be honest.
Yeah, I also I try not to. I don't like editing, so I tend to go with first or second drafts. And it's funny because sometimes at the beginning it doesn't really make sense. But then I think after time I try to give it sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think I usually go with first or second drafts, and I try not to overanalyze the lyrics too much, which sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I find that's the approach I generally enjoy.
Yeah, great. Well, Phil, thank you so much for spending some time with me.
Pleasure.
And sharing your thoughts on music and life and everything in general. And I really appreciate you being here and doing this. So thanks very much.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
I need you as the means to pull through. I need you to restore and make new. Wake me up in the morning and tell me it's time to rise. And without any warning, but the reason you're giving is sound. I need you to restore and make new. Now you see my belongings and take them and burn them to dust. There's a moment of anger, but it changes to see